For a New Year's special, I'm making a figure tutorial using Ayano Aishi. The clay I like to use is hardy paper clay. Once you get the clay you need out of the packet, make sure to seal it with tape in order to keep it moist. If you're going to use white clay, you can color it by using acrylic paint for the pigment. Knead the paint into the clay. You might want to use gloves. I'm just using gloves because I want to protect my nails. Usually I would just do this barehanded and just wash my hands afterwards. Make sure to seal whatever clay you're not using at that moment with plastic wrap in order to prevent it from drying out. If you don't have a bunch of paints already, you can also get pre-colored paper clay, but once that dries, you can hydrate it a bit with some water and knead the water into the clay. But even without adding any paint to it, it still gets a little messy. You should be working on a smooth surface, and once it gets dirty, you just get a scraper and scrape out all the paint and other debris. If you haven't learned body proportions and anatomy yet, you can just print out a picture of the figure you want to make and just shape the clay on top of that to make sure that everything is the right length and size. Normally, I would usually use a face mold for the face, but I've actually gotten a little better making my own faces, which is part of the reason why I filed down one of my the nails on my thumb, because I would use my index finger and thumb finger to pinch the area where the bridge of the nose would be, and then smooth it out with my index finger to make it more pointed, and just shape the face accordingly. Because with long nails, I usually wound up accidentally poking creases into the face. You can use water to smooth and clean little bits of debris off the surface of the clay. If your hands do get messy in the process of making this, make sure to wash them because otherwise it'll show up on the clay figure, especially in the lighter colored parts. This video is more so me just showing how I personally make figures, because I do not feel as though I'm a professional at this and good enough to actually give a real tutorial. As a matter of fact, I was actually inspired to make figures by watching a different YouTuber called Lovely For You, who does figures like 10 times better than I do. Though along the way I did kind of find my own way of doing certain things, which showed improvement compared to how I was when I first started out. But if you really want to see some really good figures, I highly recommend checking out her channel. But quite a few people who watch my videos have requested a tutorial on how I do it, so that's what this is all about. Now, I have a lot of tools for sculpting, but in my experience of using paper clay, I found the only ones that I really needed were like the small little tools, and even out of those, the two I mainly use is the round pointed tip one and the flat tipped one, and then ball it up into a sphere. Then using your hand, you roll it on one end so it tapers, and then once you get it to the length you need, choose what part you want to be the thickest and which would be the most narrow, and that would be where the top of the hip is and where the ankle is, and you just trim it accordingly. Choose the midpoint where the knee would be, and you roll it around and also roll it upwards, like up the back of the thigh, and then you go halfway down where the shin would be and roll that downward to create a curve. Then turn it around, bend where the knee would be, and then pinch it together, straighten the leg out again, and then pinch under the knee and a little bit backwards to give the leg a curve to it. Then once you're done making the leg, go ahead and make sure it's still the same length that you need it to be, because it probably got longer after you rolled it. And then you cut it at an angle at the top for where the leg would turn into the hip, and also cut off any excess at the ankle. But if you're going to make a figure that's not wearing shoes, you'd actually use more clay, and then past the ankle you just shape that clay into the foot. Now for the stand, it's best to use polymer clay because it's heavier. I tried to make a stand using paper clay once and the figure kept on toppling over. Though if you have a lot of paint already, I would recommend getting the translucent Sculpting 3 series, or if you want to do the colored clay, I would still recommend doing Sculpting 3 because I wound up getting a bunch of what's called Primo Sculpting, and that stuff is very hard and it takes several minutes to soften it up. But you can soften it up using baby oil. But yeah, you'll be kneading and crunching it so much that back when I mainly used polymer clay to make figures, my fingers would be sore by the time I finished blending all the colors. While Sculpting 3 is just naturally softer and a lot easier to work with. You can use a long blade to cut. If you don't have that, you can just use long scissors instead, but the blade can bend to make curved lines as well. Once everything is dry, or at least firm enough, you go ahead and add wires through the legs, which is very important. I learned the hard way that if you do not do that, and especially if you're going to ship it somewhere, it may not survive shipping and it will most likely snap at the narrowest part. So adding wires within it very much helps stability. For the shoes, I usually just roll the clay in an oval and then flatten it on the bottom, cut it in the middle, and then shape the back part of the shoe. Then I use a round tool to create an indent within the shoe for the leg to fit in. Water also helps the clay stick to other parts of the clay. Once it dries, it kind of fuses together. If your fingers are getting in the way of what you want to do, you can just use your tools instead. The clay that I recommend for painting the surface of the figure is Golden brand acrylic paint because it dries very quickly and it's bold. If you use like a cheaper white paint, you could see whatever colors underneath it until you paint like 3 layers of it. But with the Golden brand paint, one layer usually has a bold solid color that you don't really see through. The Golden brand acrylic paints like these are pretty expensive, so if you don't want to spend a bunch of money and just want to use regular paint instead, I recommend using a hair dryer to help speed up the paint drying process, and that way you can add layers onto it a lot faster and it will dry faster as well. Once you have the legs in the position you want, then you can add the panties at the top to hold the legs together. And while it's on the stand, you can make sure that the legs are not leaning to one side or the other, so the figure doesn't end up being crooked. If the wires from the legs are sticking outwards, make sure to bend them inwards so they don't end up sticking out of the body. You can add more clay to the back of the panties to give it more of a curve. You can use baby oil to smooth out polymer clay. If you make a mistake while painting, just use your nails or tools with water before the paint dries in order to correct it. If it does dry, then let the water sit on top of the paint for a little while to loosen it. And when painting the face, make sure the eyelashes go on last, because the eyelashes would be over top of the irises and any shine highlights. If you try to work with pieces of clay that have not hardened yet, and you still try to work with it, you might accidentally end up warping it from the shape that you meant it to be. So a good rule of thumb is after I finish shaping the head and shaping the legs, I then just let it dry at that point. When making the back of the head, you can roll it around on a smooth, flat surface in order to make it smooth all around the head. I admit I usually don't make the bangs this way, but it worked out pretty well. If you want to see how I usually make bangs, then that's going to be pretty much the same process for when I add her long side bangs later. This type of tool, though I don't know what it's called, is good for making tapered lines, which is really good for adding texture to hair. And if you're making a figure that has a ponytail, see where the ponytail would attach, and then from that point make lines going outward from it to show where the direction the hair is being pulled up to.
Who's that cute little student there, and why is she touching his arm? If she puts moves on my senpai, then I'll have to cause her harm. Maybe I should clean up this body or just dump it into the trash. Senpai could never love her, cause we're such a perfect match. Everywhere that he goes, I'll be there.
When making narrow parts for the hair, then you take a round ball of clay and narrow it down and then lightly pinch off the tip. Whatever comes off was most likely going to come off anyway after the clay dries, so that way it just makes it neater.
Coconut keeps gazing at my senpai. Don't look at senpai. Maybe I should follow her and have a friendly chat. Doesn't sound friendly. I promise not to hurt her, just to frame her for a murder. She's a senpai stealing sultry little brat. I think almost noon and no sign of my senpai. Hurry up, senpai.
As far as the type of glue to use, there are 3 different types that have 3 different purposes. You can use the liquid kind of super glue that kind of has the consistency of water. What that would be used for is to get into hard to reach places that even gel might have trouble getting into, because since it has the consistency of water, it'll get into those hard to reach places that you need glued. Now the second type of glue that I often use and do recommend is gel super glue, because that has more of a give to it. Just like liquid super glue dries very quickly, and it is usually all you really need. And the last type of glue to use is your typical slow, takes several minutes to dry type of glue. The only time where I feel the need to use that is if I'm not sure about where I want the positioning to be right away, so I will put the glue on it first, then readjust that thing that I glued to the position I want it to be, and then let it dry, because I'll have plenty of time to do it, because it usually takes about 10 minutes to completely harden. If you know that a part of the figure is messy, just wet a Q-tip and just rub the debris, paint, or whatever else is on it off of the surface of the clay until it comes out clean. Since Yan-chan has a new canon outfit, I'll be making that today. And she first actually had this outfit in the Coconut Push to Murder video, but in that video, her shoes were different than how they are in the town, so I just made the shoes based on that. And in the town version, it's kind of hard to tell whether she's wearing shorts or a skirt. So in the video, it looked like she was wearing a skirt, so that's just what I went with. If there are any part of the figures that are uneven, just use a small pair of scissors to trim it. Now when shaping the torso, you make it an oval shape at first and then take your fingers at the top of it and roll that to create the neck. Then shape the torso into the shape you need it to be, maybe use your thumb to create the rib cage, but make it narrower than you want it to look like, because afterwards you're going to put a shirt on top of that and that adds thickness. So once you do put the shirt on, it should be around the size that you actually want it to be.
It's not my fault. I'm not to blame. It is the gypsy man, the warlock sent his flame. It's not my fault if in God's plan he made the devil so much stronger than I am.
Put a long wire through the torso and neck, and the part that sticks out will be a support for the head. For the shirt, make sure to roll out the clay thin and then gently wrap it around the torso. Trim as needed. Then where each sides of the clay come together, you can use water to blend it together to get rid of the crease. You can use tools if needed. You can use curved scissors to shape the hair and fingers. Roll a cylinder with the clay and then put it next to the figure to check the arm length. Then roll the clay at the parts of the arm where it would bend, like the elbow and the wrist. When making the hands, cut the fingers on both sides to make them pointed. I had to end up adding a painty afterwards because there wasn't enough room for it. Use whichever tools you find necessary in order to add curvature to the hand and wrist. I personally use one of those rounded ball tools, whatever they're called. After you roll the arm, it's going to be thinner in certain places and longer, so put it back up against the body and then position it to where it would be an appropriate length, then cut off any excess at the shoulder. Because Yandere-chan is wearing gloves for this figure, I was going to show two different ways of making the hand, and the other one is going to be made separate from the arm, but the arm making process is the same for both arms. You pinch the hand into the appropriate shape, then you pinch the half of the hand that has the fingers on it a little thinner and use the flat tool to show the indents on where each of the fingers are going to be, then cut them with straight scissors in order to separate them. The fingertips will be stubbier this way, if that's the look that you're going for.
I've been searching city streets, trying to find the missing piece like you said. And I search hard only to find there's not a single thing that's wrong with my mind. Yeah, tired of trying to be normal.
Now, as far as painting the figure is concerned, I would paint like designs on people's clothes, or I would paint if the clothes are very tight-fitting, like stockings, for example. If someone was wearing shorts, I would actually add like a different layer of clay for that, because shorts will most likely have a lot more thickness than stockings, but with stockings or tight-fitting gloves, you can just paint those on. I'm just going to paint on the glove for the other hand, and then once you're done making the initial glove, go ahead and use a finer tipped paintbrush in order to add the top part of the glove to make the line smoother and more even. I noticed that there was a gap between her shirt and her skirt on one side, so I just wet some green clay and adjusted it accordingly so the shirt will look more even and it covers up the gap. To fill in dips and gaps and cracks and stuff, just add even more water till the point where the clay is practically mush, and then you just squish that into the creases and cracks and then use water to smooth out the surface to blend it all in. So now that I've made all relevant characters in Yandere Simulator, I'm might just record any commissions that I get from my Etsy store. So if there are any other characters that you all wanted to see being made, if you want to order a commission from me and request that I make a video of it, I'll go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I think I'm pretty much done making figures, because I've noticed that the videos of mine that get the most views are usually the animatics, and that pertains more to what I'm trying to do as far as my future career is concerned anyway. I kind of want to be like a graphic designer or an animator, like stuff dealing with pretty much drawn art. So making figurines doesn't really tie into that anyway. So for both reasons, in the future, the content I make for this channel might be like a personal story channel or doing my own original stuff, but we'll see. I'm still figuring that out, but yeah, I'm not really getting a lot of subs or views just making a bunch of figure making videos. So just as a heads up to my subscribers who subscribe specifically for figure making videos, I'm not sure whether or not there are going to be any more videos of me making figures unless otherwise commissioned. You still might want to stick around to see what I get up to in the future, but if not, I completely understand. But because illustrations, animations, and things of that nature are more what I'm trying to do job-wise, that is most likely where this channel will be headed in the future. I added a wire at the tip of the other shoe for added stability in the stand. And you press the protruding wires into the stand and make sure that they make holes in it. Then you bake the polymer clay. Then once it's cool enough to handle, you go ahead and glue the figure to the stand with preferably gel super glue because it dries very quickly, like in seconds. So thank you all for watching my figure making videos. I hope you've enjoyed them. And if you stick around with my channel to see what I make in the future, I very much appreciate it. So thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time.